各位观众大家好，欢迎收看邓鸿说法节目，我是美国律师邓鸿，我们执法说法据理力争。今天是星期一，当然今天川普在白宫里边的话召开了一个对我们加州来说是至关重要的记者会，也就是这个在今天川普正式任命副总统万斯带队来来查加州的贪腐问题，还有欺诈行为。待会我们会有这场记者会1个多小时左右，我会跟大家一起来解读一下子今天川普的记者会。不，之前的话我们可以看得出有几个重大的新闻。第一方面的话是川普他的幕僚长。也就是白宫里边的话最有影响力的这个女人，世界最有影响力的就是 Susie Vance 今天川普宣布的话 ，Susie Vance 很不幸的话犯了确诊癌症。当然的话Susie 她在公开声明里边的话，她说Susie 她现在恢复的非常好并且她会还是在不断的工作她说在治疗期间的话，她几乎全天候待在白宫里边去所以可以说是川普最新任的一个女人在2016年她帮助川普拿下了佛罗里达州，后来的话在2024年川普的总统选举是由 Susie Vance 来操盘的，所以的话这个部分自从2025年1月份开始，他就担任了白宫幕僚长，以后并且他在犯病期间的话，还是继续协助制定了中期选举的一些政治策略并且的话聚焦在物价还有跨党派的议题方面，所以这部分可以看得出当然他现在已经表示在前段时间他曾经已经是已经是早期的，已经还在但是没有对外界做任何的透露当然从目前看起来川普对 Susie Vance 的康复是非常充满信心的当然另外一个新闻就是加州川普已经采用战争时代的生产法案，要求在Santa Barbara 外海的钻井油田要恢复生产在今天钻井平台的话再度开始启动并且今天已经体的生产。当然现在目前看起来的话最重要，这也是过去10年油管停摆了之后10年以后首度开始运作的。当然现在加州在海岸线里边的话要经过州立公园这一段路现在加州政府公路局要求这家石油公司 Sable 这个公司立即移除管线，并且的话威胁在10天之内会采取法律行动。真的这个部分里边的话川普的政府已经是引用了国防生产法规定以后，他基本上他说现在我们因为伊朗战争而导致石油没办法运回来在这种情况之下加州面临的话石油危机这种情形以后开放了油管重新申请的话可能会为加州的市场提供17%的原料。真的这个部分估计每天可以生产5万桶估计很快的就是可以缓解现在加州出现的能源危机。真的这个部分里边的话，当然加州政府他说石油没有它是经过加州公园的地方我们并且已经在10年前发生了漏油的事件，已经威胁到加州生态平衡，所以想办法的话他说来阻止。不过从目前看起来的话Sable 公司这家石油公司已经先发自可以说是已经到法院里边去先告加州政府阻止了，以后这部分的话很快的10天之内有没有办法能够阻止油管的开发呢？Santa Barbara 的话估计看起来是可能性不大，因为毕竟 当联邦法跟州法有冲突的时候联邦法是有优先的，更何况川普总统已经透过了采用了国防这个生产法，这个也是在1930年所通过，授权美国总统在战争期间的话可以这个不受到地方政府的管制，要求大规模的生产。当然今天的话有另外一个案子里边的话，就是最高这个洛杉矶的法院判罚了洛杉矶一个警察，他自己的话每个月给加密货币大坑里边做保安，每个月领2万块钱。当然的话这里边呢这个他被判罚了5年的劳刑这个因为这位兼任私家侦探、兼任保镖的警察他这个跟加密货币的教父一起，然后向受害人的话勒索12.7万的这个钱，并且的话执法犯法，所以的话这个法官判罚的话，你作为警察，你还是故意来勒索别人，以后并且的话，他有一个案件涉及了让这个一名他要勒索的对象从外州到加州来，然后他自己了解警察的运作，以后报案，以后警察不知情的警察将这名他的对象逮捕，以后发现身上有毒品，然后当然这个毒品是不是他栽赃故意摄取的呢？现在还不知道。不过的说以这个理由里边的话，就来勒索对方，所以这个部分这个案件这个涉及这个这个逮捕以后还有这个部分的话在2016年2021年9月份的时候，他这个做的案件，后来的话2021年10月份有同样的方法的话也是施压，然后这个警察执法犯法，以后以这个理由里边的话，这名这个警察被联邦的法官判罚了5年的劳刑当然的话，这个还有另外一个重大的新闻，对川普来说是很大的一个胜利，就是川普上台了之后，要求将非法移民驱逐出境，但是很多国家，包括中国大陆都没办法马上接受去驱逐的人士，因为没办法查证他们的身份。针对这个部分的话，有大批这种他们出生地的国家不愿意接受他们回去，那这些非法移民就没办法驱逐，所以话在以往这个越南也好，柬埔寨也好，中国大陆也好，成批的这些已经被移民局驱逐要出境，但是因为他们的出生地不愿意接受他们回来，所以这个第9巡回法院裁决，那他们必须要保释出来，然后保释出来之后，这些已经被移民局驱逐的人士没办法驱逐。针对这个部分，川普上台了之后，他已经跟非洲的几个国家，还有南美洲的一些落后国家，以后签了合同，那这些没办法驱逐回他们出生地的地方呢，这些民众，或者是已经是走完了庇护程序，已经说又要送回他们的国家，会受到政治迫害，这种情况之下川普政府提供了驱逐第三国家，所以的话有很多非法移民的话被驱逐到非洲国家。当然这个案件的话在这个 Massachusetts 州被一名这个自由派的法官 Brian Murphy阻止了，他说这些人的话这个美国没有办法证实到这非洲国家的话不会受到迫害，所以以这个理由的话阻止非法移民的驱逐行动。当然在现在目前第1巡回法院3位上诉法官里边以2比1今天推翻了这个 Murphy 法官的裁决，他认为驱逐非法移民是属于总统的专门的权利，所以针对这个部分他们有权利的话考量将这些非法移民驱逐到第3国家。从目前看起来的话，这个会不会上诉我们现在不知道但是就算上诉到最高法院，上诉法院会不会接受这部分的话目前还没有表示。如果是第1巡回法院做出这个裁决的话，川普政府可以将非法移民送到第3国家，这种情况之下会加速川 川普驱逐非法移民的速度。同样的，如果是上诉最高法院不受理这个案件，那基本上川普政府是有这个权利这个部分。另外一个案件打到最高法院，最高法院已经是今天已经同意接收的话，就是在拜登时代，他们通过了一个所谓的 TPS Temporary Protected Status， 对叙利亚、洪都拉斯这些难民来到美国的话那因为他们的国家还面临很多的这个危机，以后这些人被驱逐回去以后可能会受到迫害。这种情况之下，拜登政府的话让大批在美国非法居留的人士暂时不驱逐现在的话，川普政府一上台了之后，就吊销了他们的这个临时不驱逐的这个总统行政命令。那现在这个案件打到了最高法院。这些申请庇护的人士说，美国总统当时已经答应不驱逐我们的，以后现在你们反悔了，总统上台了，所以这个部分的话，已经是不能够因为总统的更换，你就剥夺了我在美国的权利。当然，这个部分最高法院现在已经受理这个案件，那就是将来如果是拜登总统所签署的总统行政命令暂时不驱逐，那川普总统新上台的时候有没有这个权利取消以前任总统的所颁布的总统行政命令？这个是很重要的一个，就是新总统能不能推翻旧总统同一个议题上面的2个不同样的措施。所以针对这个部分的话，这个政府这个最高法院今天已经同意受理这个案件。那这个受理的话，有可能会在半年之内进行听证，然后要宣布结果也要4-5个月左右。所以话这个最后的结果也可能会要等到这个8个月到10个月以后才会有最后的结果了。那当然我们看看今天川普在白宫所召开的这个记者会，当然这个记者会里边的话，就是大概1个小时的长，我想的话跟大家一起来看看以后想办法来了解一下子这个加州政府它现在会采用哪种方法来处理这个部分那当然这个将来的话他们会查哪些方向呢并且这些这个将来查到的时候会不会能够影响到我们加州的选举呢这个部分的话我也想跟大家一起来看看听听这个记者会。
Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it. This is a very big thing that we're doing. It's about fraud, having to do with all the fraud that's taking place in our country. We have 2 people that are extremely brilliant and just very talented, and they're going to be put in charge. But I'd like to ask Will, if you would, to give a little description of what we're signing.
那当然，这个记者会里边的话，有这个要签署一个特别的总统行政命令。
It's about fraud, having to do with all the fraud that's taking place in our country. We have 2 people that are extremely brilliant and just very talented, and they're going to be put in charge. But I'd like to ask Will, if you would, to give a little description of what we're signing, the executive order, and then I'll ask JD to speak.
Yes, sir. As you stated in your State of the Union address, in light of widespread revelations of fraud in federally funded programs in states like Minnesota and California, this executive order in front of you will establish a new task force aimed at rooting out that fraud, returning potentially billions or tens of billions or even hundreds of billions of dollars to the American taxpayer. This task force will be chaired by the vice president. The vice chairman will be the head of the FTC, Andrew Ferguson, who's with us here as well today. But this is going to launch a whole of government approach to rooting out the very serious problem of fraud in federally funded programs around the country.
As an example, you've been seeing it and seeing it pretty big in Minnesota, $19 billion. But that's only for one little aspect of the fraud. It's $19 billion, and California, as they say, is 10 times worse, and other states are 10. And this is not a Republican-Democrat thing. This is wherever it's taking place. It seems that it's usually in blue states. If it's in a red state, we're going there too. But it seems that it's heavily, heavily, heavily Democrat. And what they've done is so sad. When you look at the Minnesota scam, a lot of it has to do with Somalia. Nobody's calling out anybody, but a lot of it has to do, but it's Somalia and plenty of others. And I believe the governor is complicit. I believe Ilhan Omar is complicit. I believe that your attorney general is complicit, and if they are, you're going to hopefully find out about it, and you're going to have to do what you have to do. If we found half of the fraud that's taking place in this country, and I think you have a chance of doing that, we would have much more than a balanced budget. That's the kind of numbers you're talking about. The theft is incredible. And I think JD will make, and Andrew will make a charge later on that local states should handle nursing homes and all of these things that the federal government shouldn't be involved in. It's too big. The federal government should handle military and a couple of other things. But when it comes to nursing homes, you saw where a young gentleman was going around and knocking on doors, and none of the nursing homes existed, none of the nurseries existed. The money that's being paid out, and the federal government pays for it. When you see all these people coming in illegally into our country, many criminals, many drug dealers, murderers, 11,888 murders, and you look at California, and more come in, and yet they never had money, and yet they pay them. You know why they pay them? Because the federal government is charged with paying. We're not paying them anymore, and I said that. So these two really smart guys are going to be, I think it's going to, hopefully it's going to be JD's. This will not be like a Kamala where she was put in charge of the border and she never went there, JD, right? You promise?
I promise, sir.
Remember Kamala was put in charge. She was the border czar. She never went to the border. She never called any of the great border patrol. The border patrol testified. We never spoke to her in 4 years. That was a disaster, but this is different. This is a different group of people. I think maybe before JD, I'll ask Stephen Miller to say a few words too, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, under President Trump's leadership, as we've seen, the illegal flow across the southern border was stopped completely. But what we found since President Trump came into office is that the Democrats have set up a system to funnel hundreds of billions and ultimately trillions of dollars to migrants that are in our country, oftentimes from places like Somalia. So as an example, ICE recently asked a group of illegal immigrants that were in detention whether or not they were receiving Medicaid. Half of them raised their hand and volunteered that they were on Medicaid, just volunteered that. These aren't the ones who are hiding it, right? They also asked illegal aliens how they paid their medical bills, and they said that if they don't have Medicaid, they go to hospitals, they get free care there, and they bill it to the taxpayers. So they aren't paying for any of their own health care in this country. This is one example. And we've seen this over and over and over again. So under President Trump's leadership, and then of course with JD and the head of the FTC, Andrew Ferguson, we are going to see the first ever effort in American history to reclaim the ultimately trillions of dollars that were stolen from taxpayers. I believe, and I know President Trump believes, that when this theft is exposed, we will see that if all of it were stopped, it would be enough to balance the budget. The extraction of wealth from American taxpayers to people who don't belong here is the primary cause of the national debt, and this is the first ever effort to shut that down. Thank you, Mr. President.
First ever, and everyone knows they've been cheating for years. It's the first ever, and it's got to be stopped. I mean, it's got to be stopped. Think of it, Somalia is a third world, maybe a fourth world nation, one of the worst, one of the most dangerous. They don't have anything. They don't have councils. They don't have government. They don't have police. They shoot each other all over the place. They come here and they steal $19 billion. It's crazy. And Ilhan Omar, I hope this is part of it, but she married her brother, supposedly. I mean, there's a lot of documentation. That means she's here illegally and she's a congresswoman. And I hope you're going to be looking at that, or somebody is, all right? Because she's one of the ringleaders here. She's bad news, really bad news. She's so bad for our country. Anyway, JD, please say a few words.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, Mr. President. This is a very important whole of government approach to tackle the fraud problem. And let me just tell one story. One of the things that even before this executive order was signed that we were able to stop under the president's leadership is we saw evidence that in Minneapolis, there were Somalis, primarily illegal immigrants, who were defrauding a Medicaid program that was meant to go to autistic children. So they were taking children who were supposed to get benefits, and they were claiming that their kids were actually autistic even though they weren't. And what did this mean? This meant two things. Number one, you had a lot of people getting rich off of the fraud while American citizens got poor. And the second thing that it meant is that you had autistic kids in Minneapolis, in suburban Minneapolis, who weren't getting benefits they needed because Somali fraudsters were literally stealing out of their pocket. It's got to stop. And unfortunately, that kind of fraud is one example of probably hundreds just within the state of Minneapolis, and then it's repeated and replayed all over the United States of America. When we first started talking about this problem, the president made it very clear he wanted us to take the fraud problem seriously because nobody had until he was president. We started to figure out one big hole that existed is that the agencies of the government weren't actually talking to each other. So Treasury would have evidence of financial fraud, but wasn't talking to the Department of Justice about it. Health and Human Services had evidence of Medicaid fraud, but wasn't talking to the Department of Treasury about it. So what this executive order does is force the entire apparatus of the federal government to do two things: stop the fraud in the American taxpayer and make sure that the benefits that ought by right go to American citizens and not to fraudsters. Andrew Ferguson will be the vice chair and is going to do a great job. If you're curious what's the difference between the vice chair and the chair, the vice chair is going to do all the work, and I'm going to take all the credit. Andrew.
Yeah, look, I mean, millions and millions of Americans pay into these programs every day, and they expect to get something out of it. And this fraud is just siphoning money that millions of Americans pay to fund their hospitals, to fund their daycare centers, into completely fake businesses. It isn't just unfair to all of us as taxpayers who pay for all this. It's particularly unfair to the Americans who need this the most and watch this money leave their hospital, leave their school system, and go out to fraud. And that is why this effort is so important. And I think we've just begun really looking at this, but I think that one of the things we're going to find is that in a lot of these agencies, the previous administration was pretty lax about existing anti-fraud controls, and we're going to expose that too.
I would take the word pretty out. I would change it with unbelievably lax. They weren't, not even lax. Lax isn't a good enough word. The previous administration was fraudulent, okay? And I think that's what you're going to find also. And, you know, we worked so hard, like most favored nations drug prices. For years, people have wanted. We paid the highest drug prices anywhere in the world by far, by 5 times, 6 times, 10 times, more than London would be paying in New York, more than any city in Europe was paying than our cities. We would have a pill that would sell for $10 in Munich. In Germany, we sell for $10, and in New York, it would be $130 or whatever. And we worked so hard, and we pulled it off. It's called most favored nations. So now we went from by far the most expensive drugs anywhere in the world, prescription drugs, to the least expensive. And I had to get all the nations to agree, and I don't want to bore you with how I did it, but I did it. Everyone said it was impossible to do, including the drug companies, and we did it. We worked so hard on it, and we're going to save so much money for the people. Your drug prices are going to be dropping at levels never even, by 50, 60, 70, 80% in some cases. But you work so hard, and then you see them stealing $19 billion. It's like in one pocket, out the other. And I think Andrew and JD, I think have maybe one of the most important jobs. Maybe it could be one of the most important things that we're signing because I really believe that they have an opportunity to do something so good for our country. You know, people talk about balancing budgets. You can't balance a budget when people are stealing $19 billion, and nobody's ever heard of anything like it. We had, I guess, in the same state, you went autism, where 4 or 5 years ago they spent $1 million, and now it's almost $400 million. In just a few years. Well, autism didn't go up like that. And even the 1 million was probably a fraud, but it went from 1 million to almost 400 million in just a few years. These are crooked people. They basically said everybody in the state had autism. These are crooked, horrible people. And, you know, I was elected on with JD, Make America Great Again. That was it. And we can't have this stuff happening. Right. We have to be respected. And they left. So I'm going to sign this. We'll take some questions, but let me sign this first before I don't forget. Let's see. Before I decide not to, okay?
Yes, sir.
I don't forget not to, but maybe I'll decide not to. I would decide not to. If I didn't think they could do the job, I would decide not to. But that'll be a terrible thing. I think they're going to find numbers. Andrew, I think you're going to find numbers that are far higher than you even think. And you know, Andrew came to us. He said, sir, he's read the stories about Minnesota. We know California is many times worse, but Minnesota's terrible. They're all terrible. Those cities are terrible. New York is terrible. What's going on in Chicago, Illinois, with that slob of a governor is terrible. And the kind of money we're talking about is just country changing. It's country changing money. It's having a deficit to having a really profitable country where you can lower your taxes substantially for people. And I think you have an opportunity to do it. And I think you two guys are the right guy. If you guys can't do it, got a problem, because nobody else will be able to do it.
Yes, sir.
So I'll sign, and then we'll take some nice questions from our wonderful media. Okay.
Go on.
There you go. Very important. That's a big deal. We've been working on this very long.
Yes,
Steve,
sir.
right? Will?
Yes, sir.
Andrew, do you have a question?
Yes, Mr. President. You said during your State of the Union that this type of fraud, the corruption, is the type of thing that can shred the fabric of a nation. Why do you suppose then that leaders of recent memory haven't looked at the systemic amount of fraud that's
Because they're
taking place? And how
Because
much-
they're crooked. They make money. They gain power. They use it for power. Like with the Somalians, they vote in a block, 100%. They make a deal with the Somalians. They all vote because they're on a gravy train. It's a company. It's money first, power second. A lot of people say power first. No, it's money first, power second. Do you ever see where like Mercedes? People come over from Somalia. They have no money, and now they're buying Mercedes-Benz cars. Okay, it's more cash goes out of the Minnesota airport than any other place in the world or something. We're going to find it. And Minnesota is really bad. The governor's corrupt. The attorney general is totally corrupt, just like the New York State attorney general, Letitia James. She's a highly corrupt person. Bragg, the DA, is a corrupt person. They're all corrupt. These are corrupt people. And we got too many of them in our country. And we have to expose them, and we have to catch them. And if these two guys can't, these are high IQ people. I've always liked high IQ. These are high IQ people. If they don't do it, we're going to go a long way, fellas, to find somebody else that's going to. We have no choice. If honestly, and they may not do a good job. If they don't do a good job,
Thank you, sir.
no, it's possible. If they don't do a good job, the country's sort of in trouble. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Two questions. For
And I think they're going to do a great job. Go ahead.
First, Mr. Vice President, Democrats are already calling you the fraud czar. What's your reaction to that title? And then second, given
I like
your past skepticism of foreign adventurism, are you completely on board with the current war in Iran?
So I like fraud czar. It's certainly what we're going to do. And look, we have to do it. As the president said, this is a problem that has festered in this country for far too long, and far too few people have actually wanted to do anything about it. That's what makes this administration different, is that we actually tackle the problems the American people have been confronting. So I'm very happy about it. And look, I think that I know what you're trying to do, Phil. You're trying to drive a wedge between members of the administration, between me and the president. What the president said consistently, going back to 2015, and I agreed with him, is that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. We have taken this military action under the president's leadership. I think all of us, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, should pray for success and pray for the safety of our troops. That's the approach that I've taken. Make it as successful as possible.
So there's no hesitation, given your past statements, with the current operation?
What do you mean there's no hesitation with my past statements?
Given your skepticism of foreign adventurism, you were a critic of the global war on terror previously.
Well, I think one big difference, Phil, is that we have a smart president, whereas in the past we've had dumb presidents. And I trust President Trump to get the job done, to do a good job for the American people, and to make sure that the mistakes of the past aren't repeated. Absolutely.
Look, JD's been great. But here's the simple thing. And I have, some people, I don't want wars. I want wars less than almost anybody. Peace through strength. But you know what? I've watched Iran for a long time. I called them out 20 years ago when I was a civilian that liked watching the world. And they're violent, vicious people, the leadership, violent, vicious people. They killed 32,000 protesters over the last 3 weeks. They put out a memo 2 days ago saying, if you protest, we will shoot you and kill you in the streets. And somebody said, oh, there's not that many protests. Well, first of all, there are bombs going off all over the place. But even if there weren't, who's going to do that? Who's going to do it? They don't have any guns, and the other ones have latest in line machine gun, right? And every form of gun you can have. They shoot them right through the middle of the head. They're violent people. If they had a nuclear weapon, they would use it. And sometimes I'll have some of the people that, feel very strongly, like I do about wars. And I say, do you think Iran is violent? And do you think their people are violent? Yes, leadership. Do you think they should have a nuclear weapon, which is massive power? I don't even want to discuss how powerful, because it's depressing. And they said, no, they shouldn't have. Definitely they shouldn't have. I said, and you don't want to fight war? No, we don't want to fight war. So these are naive people that frankly are stupid. If you believe that Iran should have a nuclear weapon, there's something wrong with you, because they would use it within, the only question is, within 1 hour if they get it, or 1 day. They will use it, and they will blow up the entire Middle East, not just Israel. They'll start with Israel, but they will blow up. And you got to see that when they unexpectedly started sending missiles to every country within 1,000 miles of them. I mean, they're blowing up countries that were neighbors, not necessarily some friends. They actually were blowing up some friends. They were blowing up the people that handle their accounts. They're sending thousands of missiles into countries that didn't expect to be in the war because they wanted to take over the Middle East. And if I didn't terminate Barack Hussein Obama's horrible Iran nuclear deal, which I did in my first term, one of the dumbest deals, perhaps the dumbest deal because of the danger involved, you would have had them have a nuclear weapon 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. They would have used it, blown up the Middle East, and they would have then come after us. And if these gorgeous B-2 bombers, give me that bomber, Andrew. Let me just hug that little sucker. Give me that bomber over there. Thank you. You knew immediately which one. This looks small, but in person it's very big. Because it's the only plane capable of carrying a 200,000-pound bomb. So I don't know how they do it because it's very sleek and nice, but it carries a lot of weapons and there's a lot of bombs. But had I not sent this incredible machine times numerous others to hit Iran at midnight with no moon, dead dark, every single bomb was dropped right down the chute that it was supposed to hit. How they do it, who knows? Nobody else can figure. No other country can do it. No other country has our military or even close. And I think we've probably proven that with Venezuela and now with because we have done a number in Iran. But if I didn't do that, if I didn't decimate, I call it their nuclear dust, they would have had a nuclear weapon within 1 month after that bombing took place. And they would have used it on first Israel and then the Middle East. And you know that because all of those missiles that were launched against their neighbors were set long ago, long before they knew they would be using them this quickly. Had we not done this, you would have had a nuclear war that would have evolved into World War III. And more important, this is a war that there would have been nothing left. So we've done a great thing. The people that say it's okay for a very sick ideology, a very sick country in terms of its leadership, very good people, great people. But the people that say that, I think they're actually, they're either evil or they're stupid. So if you believe that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon, they should not have it, then you have to absolutely love what I've done because in 2 weeks we have decimated them. They have no Navy, they have no Air Force, they have no anti-aircraft weapons, they have no leadership. The leadership is gone. But then they set up a new leadership to go and name a new leader and that leadership is gone. And now they think maybe the sun is gone. They're all gone. My biggest problem is I have no idea who we're talking to because nobody ever heard of any of these people. They're all dead. But we did a job for the world, not a job for us, for the whole world. We took the worst country in 50 years and maybe longer from the ideological standpoint, a country that wanted to blow up the world, a country that is sick, and it has a religious fervor. And when you add religion, you know, people don't realize more people died in religious wars than every other war put together. And that's what you would have had here. And it was a terrible thing. I'm very proud of what we did. And I think JD understands better than most. If you give Iran a nuclear weapon, at least a very substantial part of the world would be blown up, and it'll be used almost immediately. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You don't mind if I keep this here, do you? Isn't that a beautiful thing? You know, I used to look at it, and I said, it's a piece of art, but how can it be effective? It's so stealth. Think of it, Peter. 1 a.m, it flies in, and they say, sir, they're in Iranian airspace. And I say, oh, and I'm watching it from the Situation Room with a couple of other very smart people, including some good generals, real generals, not television generals. And all of a sudden you see that dive, they start diving, and you see them 30,000, 20,000. Boy, I said, that was a lot. They went down fast to aim it. And they know they're coming, and they're smart, and they never saw them. And they're firing a little bit, but they don't know what they're firing at because they can't see a thing. And then you hear the biggest explosions that anybody's ever heard. Those are the biggest bombs. outside of nuclear, those are the biggest bombs. And you say, what technology we have? What a great country. I built it largely. I built it during my first term. I built it. I did not have to use it this much in my second term. But we had an incompetent president. We had an incompetent administration. And if that group of people in any form, whether it's Kamala, him, it doesn't matter, would have had another 4 years, we would have had no country left. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You say you're doing a job for the rest of the world. In your conversations with your counterparts, are they thanking you? What are their conversations like when you talk about this military conflict that's taking place in Iran?
Well, they should be thanking me because many of them get 90%. China, as an example, should be thanking us, but I don't expect to thank you, but they should be thanking us. Japan gets 95%, China 91%. Many of the countries, South Korea gets a tremendous percentage of their oil and therefore their energy from the Straits, and or as they call it, the Strait. And they should be not only thanking us, they should be helping us. What does surprise me is that they're not eager to help. There are a couple. We'll be announcing some names soon. There are some that really were right up front. I would announce the name now, other than maybe they'd prefer it not being announced for whatever reason. I will say this: it's a lot easier to get people today than it was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, before we destroyed before we obliterated the country, before we took out, because they're down to about 8% of their missiles. They're down to a small portion of their drones, and we've demolished many of their factories where they make the missiles and the drones, and the rest are all following. Our military has been amazing. We hit Carg Island, took out every single thing on Carg Island except one thing. We left the pipes, because if we take out the pipes, it takes a long time to build them. And at some point, something's going to happen that's positive with respect to those pipes. But there are some countries that greatly disappointed me. And, I'm the one that got them to pay from 2% to 5% of GDP, NATO. And I get along great with those countries in NATO, but I always said, the problem with NATO is we'll always be there for them, but they'll never be there for us. And when I hear the UK, which was sort of considered the Rolls Royce of allies, right? When you say they were the oldest and they were going to be there. And I say it would be really helpful if you'd send over a couple of ships. And if you have some minesweepers, which they do, be very helpful. And the prime minister is a nice man. I think he's a very nice guy. He says, well, I'd like to ask my team. I said, you don't have to worry about a team. You don't have a team. You're the prime minister. You can make a decision. Well, I have to speak to my people. I said, you don't have to speak to anybody. So it's very disappointing. And then after we obliterated them, destroyed their military, the whole thing, and it became a much safer zone, he said, we're going to send over 2 aircraft carriers. I said, I don't want them anymore. I don't want them after we win. I want them before we start. I don't need your aircraft carriers after we've already won. So, those things are very disappointing. And you have to remember, we have 45,000 troops in Japan. We have 45,000 troops in South Korea. We have 45,000, 50,000 troops in Germany. We defend all these countries. And then, do you have any minesweepers? And they say, well, would it be possible for us not to get involved? I've been saying it for a long time. This is the greatest thing to come out of this. We spend trillions and trillions of dollars on NATO to defend other countries. And I always said, but if it ever comes time to defend us, they're not going to be there. Many of them would not be there. And we're going to have to start thinking more wisely in this country. Some have been very good. 1 or 2 have been great. I'll tell you who the great ones are at the right time. But there have been some that were right up there, Peter. They were right up there. They wanted to do it so much. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you. You were talking about Iran a couple times today and what they did after Epic Fury began. You said they hit Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait. Nobody expected that. We were shocked. Are you surprised that nobody briefed you ahead of time that might be their retaliation?
Nobody, no. The greatest experts, nobody thought they were going to hit. They were, I wouldn't say friendly countries. They were like neutral. They lived with them for years. Peter, they were going to take over the Middle East. They were going to knock out Israel with their nuclear weapon. But after we knocked out their nuclear potential weapon, they started building missiles, thousands and thousands of missiles. And they were going to do it with missiles while they developed. These are sick people. While they developed nuclear, somehow they were going to start at a different site, because that site was, you saw the site, the mountain. They were going to go into a certain area, which we know exactly where it is. and they were going to do that. And it's incredible what we've done. I tell you, the job we've done. Do you know, if I didn't terminate Barack Hussein Obama's Iran nuclear deal, you would right now, well, Israel would be gone. It would be incinerated, and probably the Middle East likewise. And remember, they got all of those missiles. And I heard they were sending missiles to UAE. I said, that's strange. You know, UAE is like the banker for Iran. They're like the banker. Qatar, their neighbors, they got along okay. Saudi Arabia, all of a sudden, Kuwait is getting hit. Bahrain is getting, all these countries are getting hit. There was no expert that would say that was going to happen. It's not a question of like, gee, should you have known? And if we did know, big deal. I mean, we have to do what we have to do. But we hit them so hard like nobody's ever been hit. We hit them very hard. And we've extinguished most of their missiles. We've extinguished most of their drones. We've extinguished most of the places where the missiles and the drones are built. We've fully extinguished 2 layers of leadership and probably a third, if you believe some story. So we only have one thing, to have a little choke point, and they've used it very well for years, but it doesn't work. But I think this, if some of these countries that we've been good to for years, and maybe more important than that, some of these countries that get 90% and 95% of their energy from Hormuz, the Strait. Hormuz, a famous, wonderful, beautiful place, but you wouldn't want to be necessarily sailing a boat there right now.
I would not.
Okay, you know why? Not because of them, because of us. Because we've taken out their entire Navy. We've taken out every one of their drone, they call it a drone layer, a mine layer. There's specific boats that are meant to put mines on. How would you like to have a nation that has 22 boats where their sole function, they're very different looking boats. You wouldn't want one for your family. They're not pretty. Their sole function is to lift a mine into the water and drop it a certain number of feet down. But they had 22 of them. We've taken out all of them, but you can probably drop them off other boats. So we don't even know. By the way, we don't know that any mines have even been dropped. But the thought that they would scares people that have billion-dollar ships. Yeah, please.
Thank you, President Trump. I'd like to ask the Vice President about his plans to go after possible fraud in California and New York. We know, of course, about Minnesota. President Trump, first could I ask you, you said earlier today that the new Supreme Leader of the Republican Committee, you don't know if he's dead or alive. There are a couple interesting reports about him today. There's one report that he just narrowly escaped death in the first airstrikes by stepping out into his garden. There's another report that he may actually be gay despite leading a theocracy that hates gay people. How do you determine what's true, and do you have an assessment of this?
Well, so far, nobody knows. If you look at his father, he used to give talks a lot, you know, talking about death to America. He'd say death to America all the time. When they say death to America, you should believe them, because that's what they would have. If they had a nuclear weapon, they would have used it. But they never had the chance. I never gave them the chance to use it. And other presidents should have done. I spoke to one of the former presidents who I actually like. I actually speak to some. I do like some people. It'd be shocking. And he said, I wish I did what you did. Could have done it. Other presidents, somebody should have done it. 47 years this went on. They call Iran the bully of the Middle East. And you could have never had the Abraham Accords. You could never have had peace in the Middle East. Now you're going to have peace. You could never do it with the dark cloud of a nuclear Iran. But Iran is a shell of itself. It's no longer a bully. It's the one that gets bullied. It's a bully that got beat up. We beat the crap out of them. And they deserve that. You know, when you see a soldier walking down the street without his arms, or being helped down the street because he's got no legs, or his face is blown to smithereens with no legs and no arms, those two, no legs, no arms, and a face that got racked. That was done by roadside bombs. That's the favorite weapon of Soleimani, who I killed in my first administration, General Soleimani. Had I not killed him, that was the beginning of their downfall, because had he not gone, it's possible that we would not be this far advanced in destroying Iran, because he was a really good general. He was a vicious, horrible man, but he was a brilliant general. And he was looking to knock out 5 of our military bases at one time. And the man that died with him was his counterpart in Iraq. And they were working together, and they got hit real hard. And if that didn't happen, we would have had a problem. But maybe more importantly than that, he was really the mastermind behind it. And they never found somebody to replace him in terms of the genius. I knocked him out, and that was a big step, knocking him out. But if we didn't get rid of the Obama deal, I terminated it against the wishes of my then Secretary of State. He was no Marco. Against the wishes of a lot of people at the time. You remember that, Peter? A lot of people. Had I not terminated, remember that, Stephen? You remember? They were all going, dude, this is not, that deal was a disaster. That was a road to a nuclear weapon. They would have had it 3 years ago, and it would have been used, I would say, 2 to 3 years ago, and it would have been used in the Middle East. And by the way, after they were finished that, they were coming over here. They never got a chance to do it.
I just want to ask you about something very interesting that you said twice today. That you talked to another former president about the Iran strikes. Was it George W. Bush?
No.
Was it Bill Clinton?
I don't want to say. I don't want to say. Because a member of a party, they have Trump derangement syndrome, all, but it's somebody that happens to like me, and I like that person who's a smart person. But that person said, I wish I did it. Okay, but I don't want to get into, I don't want to get him into trouble. Maybe, hey, you know what? I think you probably know. You know, it's interesting. And maybe he'd be proud. I could even ask him that, would you like me to reveal your name to Peter at Fox? Well, at least you have high ratings. Your ratings are through the roof, Peter.
Yeah, thank you for noticing.
Congratulations.
Can I ask you another question? Yeah. If Iran, as you said, totally obliterated, got the missiles, got the first 2 rounds of leadership, Air Force gone, Navy gone, can we wrap this war up this week?
Yeah, sure.
Will we?
I don't think so, but it'll be soon. Won't be long. And we're going to have a much safer world when it's wrapped up. It'll be wrapped up soon. We're going to have a much safer world. I had an obligation to do this. I didn't want to, I call it an excursion. I didn't want to make this journey. We had the highest stock market in history. We had low gas prices. Everything was good. And I know exactly, I know what, you know, you're going to do it. People are going to raise the price of oil. That's good. But I know that. But that's a very small thing compared to allowing them to have, you want to see a stock market go down? Start letting them hit you with nukes, okay? I think, I said it this morning, I think it's a very small price to pay. And frankly, I thought it was going to go down much more, if you want to know the truth. I assumed that it was going to go down much more, only because people don't understand to a large, it's a big chess game at a very high level. It's a very high level chess, the highest. And I'm dealing with very smart players. These are smart people. They don't get there. You know, when you deal with some of these people, you're dealing with high level intellect, very high IQ people. These are not Jasmine Crockett and her group. These are smart people. These are really smart people, and violent people, and vicious people, and some very nice people. And some are very nice but violent. They turn violent. But you know what? If I didn't do what I did, we would have been hit. Number one, very important, was the termination of Obama's horrible deal, and number two, this beautiful plane hitting them 8 months ago, whatever it was, and taking out their nuclear capacity. That totally threw them for a loop. If they had that bomb at either time, 5 years ago or 7 months ago, if they had that bomb would have been used almost immediately.
Mr. President, 2 questions on domestic policy, bringing it close to home. First of all, the Save America Act, what are you expecting this week when this vote takes place in the U.S. Senate? Will the Vice President's vote be
I think it's
necessary?
imperative that it gets done. I'm not sure it is. You know, the Democrats have horrible policy. It's just incredible. But they stick together. It's the one thing they do. Their Supreme Court members stick together. Those appointed by a Democrat stick together. If Barack Hussein Obama appoints a member of the Supreme Court, that member never goes against him. And they're proud about it. They say, I don't give a damn if it's good or bad. That man appointed me and I'm never going to let him down. I don't say that's right, wrong. I just say they stick together. Republicans go the opposite way. If Donald Trump appointed me, I'm going to show the world that I can be totally just and I can be independent of Donald Trump. He's not controlling me. And I don't want to control them. I just want to have smart decisions. They gave us a decision on tariffs the other day that won't change tariffs. I can do it a different way. I always knew I could do it a different way. This was a little quicker, a little easier, a little better. But they gave it a decision that could cost this country $500 billion to pay people back, because now I have to start the tariffs all over again. Very simple. And what happens with the money I've already collected? Why didn't they say, starting from now, go the other way? $500 billion, perhaps. It's so sad. But one thing about the Democrats, they stick together like glue. They impeached me twice for absolutely no reason, unanimously. Fortunately, the Republicans stuck together, and it was something. It was pretty wild. But the Democrats have horrible policy: transgender for everybody, open borders, men playing in women's sports. But the one thing they do have is they stick together, no matter how bad the policy. It's embarrassing to watch them try to defend it. And in a way, I say, as a Republican, I say, thank goodness they have bad policy, because you'd never beat them. We have something in there now, the Save America Act, voter ID with a picture, right? That's a 99% issue. Even among Democrats, Democrats poll at 89% on that. And then they have proof of citizenship. And then they have no mail-in ballots. No mail-in ballots. We have no mail-in. You go to California, they send out like 38 million ballots. Some Democrats get 7, 8 ballots. Republicans are a lot of times calling in, where's my ballot? Where's my ballot? They're lucky to get one. Jimmy Carter, probably the greatest thing he ever did. I thought he was a nice man, not a great president, to put it mildly. How did his attack work out in Iran? Not too good. I think ours is slightly better, wouldn't you say? But Jimmy Carter, the one thing he did after he left with Scoop Jackson and some others, they formed a very elite council, committee that came out and said very strongly, no mail-in ballots, because we're the only country in the world that has mail-in ballots like we do. The only country in the whole world. People have tried it. France tried it and they went away. They're now doing paper ballots, watermark paper, which is very hard to cheat. So when you look at what happens with this country, we really have to fix it. That'll be very popular. The other thing we put in there, just as best of, I call it the best of Trump. We have the three things I just said, right? But then I added on no men playing in women's sports, and I added a no transgender surgery, the mutilation of our children. We have no mutilation of our children, no transgender. I think they say that's an 80% issue. I think they're 99% issues, but whether they're 80% or 99%. The problem is we have a couple of Republicans. They shouldn't be allowed. They're horrible people, and they're willing to vote against anything. And we have all the Democrats who vote against it. So I think it hurts the Democrats to vote against it, because I'm going to instruct all the Republicans to say that so-and-so that they're running against voted against the saving of our children from transgender mutilation, right? That's pretty unpopular. They want men and women's sports. That's pretty unpopular. They want voter ID, but the Democrats don't. Everybody wants voter ID. Everybody wants proof of citizenship. And most people don't want mail-in voting because they know it's a fraud. Touches too many hands. I mean, the postman gets it, this one gets it, that one. So these are all issues that are in the 90s to 100. I would say some are virtually 100%. And the interesting thing is they're that way not only with the Republicans. I'm not talking about leadership. I'm talking about they're that way also, most importantly, with the people. The people of our country want voter ID. The people of our country want proof of citizenship. And that includes 88%, 89% of Democrats. And I think the Republicans, Eric Schmidt, Rick Scott, Tim Scott, I speak to so many of them, they all want it. I hope John Thune can get it across the line. He's trying. I mean, he told me this morning, I spoke to him, he's trying. I think it'll be a very, very bad thing for our country if they don't. We're just asking for basic things. Think of it. You can't have voter ID. Do you know in California, if you ask a person to show their identification, they have the right to put you in jail if you're an official and you say, may I please see your identification, you're subject to going to jail. That's how crazy it's gotten with a low IQ person, because Gavin Newsom has admitted that he has learning disabilities. Honestly, I'm all for people with learning disabilities, but not for my president. I think a president should not have learning disabilities, okay? And I know it's highly controversial to say such a horrible thing. The president of the United States, Gavin Newsom, admitted that he has learning disabilities, dyslexia, everything about him is dumb. But then he looked at the audience and said, but I'm smarter than you, or something like that. That was pretty stupid. So now on top of everything else, they call him a racist because it happened to be a black audience. I will tell you this. I think it was the worst interview I've ever seen of any human being in my life. Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
Will it be necessary to use even a limited ground force to secure whatever nuclear material remains in Iran as part of that threat?
No.
And secondly, have you made a decision?
You mean to go in and get it?
Yes, sir.
Why would I tell you a thing like that?
And secondly,
I can't stand reporters. Sir, will you attack Carg Island? Will you occupy Carg? They ask me these questions. And I don't want to be mean, but they're stupid questions. If any president answered those questions, they shouldn't be president.
and secondly, sir, do you still plan to travel to Beijing at the end of this?
I don't know. We're working on that right now. We're speaking to China. I'd love to, but because of the war, I want to be here. I have to be here, I feel. And so we've requested that we delay it a month or so. And I'm looking forward to being with them. We have a very good relationship, but because of the war, there's no tricks to it either. It's not like, oh, gee, I'm waiting. It's very simple. We got a war going on. I think it's important that I be here. So it could be that we delay it a little bit. Not much, Peter.
When you say Cuba is next,
Cuba.
is Cuba, whatever you do with the military there, it seems like something, will that look more like Iran or Venezuela?
Can't tell you that. I can tell you that they're talking to us. It's a failed nation. They have no money. They have no oil. They have no nothing. They have nice land. They have nice landscape. It's a beautiful island. I think they have great people. I know so many people from Cuba that were treated terribly, and they're over here and they became rich. They're very entrepreneurial people, very smart. I know a lot from Florida, especially. There's so many people. A friend of mine started over with nothing. He's now the largest owner of gas stations in the country and stuff. Cuban. I also know I was just with a fantastic person who's Cuban, made a fortune in sugar, Fanjul family, right? And this family wants to go back to Cuba to visit it. They haven't been back in like 50 years or something. They largely come from Cuba. And we'll see what happens. They were asking me about that. They want to go back. Not only Fanjul, a lot of Cubans have said, oh boy, would they love to go back. I think Cuba, I know, in its own way, for tourism and everything else, it's a beautiful island, great weather. They're not in a hurricane zone, which is nice for a change, They won't be asking us for money for hurricanes every week. But I think Cuba's the end. All my life I've been hearing about the United States and Cuba. When will the United States do it? I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. It'd be good. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. Whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth? They're a very weakened nation right now. They were for a long time. Very violent leaders. Castro was a very violent leader. His brother's a very violent leader. Extremely violent. That's how they governed. They governed with violence. But a lot of people would like to go back. Okay, one more question.
One question on fraud for Vice President Vance. Mr. Vice President, you announced a couple of weeks ago, the EOB, that the administration would be halting Medicaid payments to Minnesota until the state decided to take pervasive steps to root out fraud. Do you have an update to that specific situation? Do you think that could be a model moving forward for the task force for states that won't cooperate?
So I don't have an update there. Dr. Oz is looking to trying to work with the authorities in Minnesota to try to figure that situation out. But yeah, I think there are two obvious tools that we have to stop the fraud that's happening against the American people. One is that when we see evidence of fraud, we stop the payments. Pretty simple, right? We know that the American people are being defrauded. Let's try to stop the payments and ensure that whoever's making these payments is actually complying with some basic due diligence and making sure the payments are going to the right place. I think the second tool, of course, we have, as the president mentioned, is we have law enforcement options. We know that some of this fraud is just bad. Some of it's criminal. We know that people are intentionally trying to defraud the American people. It's not just in Minnesota, it's all across the country.
99% is criminal.
Yes, sir. So this is one of the reasons why DOJ is such an important part of this, is because we have to make sure that where we see criminal conduct, we actually prosecute it. And the president's talked about this a lot in the past. I don't need to repeat it, but it's worth noting that so many times when we find people engaged in really, really bad conduct, you know, the local judge or the local grand jury tries to stop it. One of the cool things about what we're doing is we're trying to take some innovative steps to ensure that when we find criminal fraud, we can actually prosecute it all the way to the end.
She wanted one question. She's over here, and you guys are over there. Where's your main camera? Is it this one? Which one is the main camera? Okay, good. Nice center. Good. I thought it was that one.
Thanks, Mr. President. Remember, with Daily Wire, not CNN. We just wanted to ask about DHS, still not funded, but we reported earlier today that 80% of the primary task force that focuses on investigating terrorism is working without pay. So should that impact Democrats' decision?
The Democrats aren't paying. The Democrats, we have a deal. They just said, we're not going to pay. We're not going to do anything. And it's terrible. The Democrats are terrible. You know, it'd be nice to get along, but for years this has been going on, not just with me. For years it's been going on. Different ideology, but also different tactics. Here we are, we're fighting big battles with a very tough enemy and winning nicely. And we're not allowed to have security in our country. It's crazy. The Democrats don't want to pay. These are bad people. These are not people that love our country, I can tell you that. Very sick people. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
那当然他这个记者会里边有几点的话，因为这也是在过去2个礼拜第一次在白宫里边川普请记者进了这个白宫办公室里边的话跟开了记者会之前我们可以看得出他曾经公开在这个佛罗里达的国会议员里边所讲的要求全力推动拯救美国法案的通过，后来的话他也在公开的演讲场合里边去在几场，但是这次的话他最重要我们可以看得出他现在是任命万斯要加强对这个福利欺诈进行调查，当然他所提名的副手是这个联邦贸易委员会。其实贸易委员会他查的最重要是几个一个的话是不公平竞争垄断行为你可以看得出谷歌微软的这些官司都是属于这 Federal Trade Commission 所做的当然现在的话也有这种消费者保护当然现在的话他将FTC 还有副总统万斯，最后的话万斯也说会跟 DOJ 一起配合来起诉当然这个欺诈牵扯到2方面，一方面是福利欺诈，另外一方面的话就是这个申请联邦经费的时候这个或者是申请政府任何福利的时候提供假的资料，这部分针对是不单只是骗子，并且川普一再强调的话这些州长还有检察长这些的中勇骗罪欺骗行为的都是是共谋，都应该被起诉。所以他特别提到这个 Omar 这个国会议员，他说因为他要调查他们的这个帮助跟兄弟结婚这个事情这个要看一下子是不是这个有欺诈行为当然的话他再度提出来塞马利亚这些人的话难民过来的以后没过几年就开的这个Mercedes 这个这些豪华的车子，那用的钱都是我们这个纳税人的钱，所以这个部分他也是再度强调。当然在记者会里边我们可以看得出有几个关键的人物有争议性的，但是的话并没有消失掉，就是第一个是 Stephen Miller 的话他这个曾经就是因为推动 ICE 的政策用跟Kristi Noem 2个一起来推动，然后这个导致 Kristi Noem 的话现在不得不要换人，很多人外界传闻的话，那是不是 Stephen Miller 会退居呢退居2线呢川普不再相信他的建议呢 在这次这个记者会里边 ，Stephen Miller 的话扮演很重要的角色在这个 Will 这个川普的助手在递交这个这个总统行政命令的时候，他特别请 Stephen Miller 来解说这个背景Stephen Miller 再度提出来他说这个欺诈案件如果是能够清理的话这个我们现在知道的话只是冰山一角这个可以看得出，如果是真的是你可以看到 Stephen Miller 里边再度谈到的话这个 ICE 所扣留的非法移民里边的话，很多这些非法移民都是在领我们这个政府补助赞助的医疗，这也是可以看得出在 Stephen Miller 的政策里边的话，他在这个福利欺诈其中也是这个驱逐非法移民的一个重要的一个政策里边当然的话在里边这个 FTC 里边的这个已经从转向从那边去从消费保护跟垄断的调查现在的话开始进行福利的调查。同样的记者最后在最后2个问题也提到问 JD Vance 的话这个 JD Vance 的话曾经说要在联邦对 Minnesota 州的医疗保险的补助这部分现在进展怎么样？这个 JD Vance 他说 Dr. Oz 他们正在查正在协调所以他不会再影响合法的应该补助的这个的合法移民公民的福利情况之下的话他希望能够这个杜绝任何的贪腐行为还有欺诈行为。当然的话回到战争这个部分的话，川普特别有意思的话，这个 Peter 这个 Fox News 的他的问了几个问题这个川普自己也承认民主党的一个总统也向他这个承认过，他说其实我们美国早就应该这个向这个伊朗开战的将他的核弹能力的话这个摧毁掉。当然他问的话你讲的是哪个总统，是不是老布希小布希川普多不是，然后的话是不是克林顿然后当然这个川普说我不愿意讲出是哪一位民主党的总统当然的话他也提到的话在2016年这个2017年他当选了之后取消掉奥巴马跟伊朗的这个协议，因为这个协议的话如果他不取消，很快的这个伊朗就可能会在2018年就可能会这个有这个核弹的能力了后来的话拜登上台了之后还继续这个对伊朗采取一个中庸的态度，所以的话有可能这个他讲了有可能五年前我们这个伊朗就可以有核弹能力，或者是7个月以前，也就是拜登上台的时候的话，他说这个取消掉让他恢复的伊朗的这个研发这个核弹的能力。所以它里边的话，所以这2个总统排除民主党的2个剩下的活着的这个总统的话，奥巴马是不可能这个还有这个拜登也不可能，这唯一一个的话就是克林顿了。但是的话川普也说这个其实民主党的总统有智慧有头脑的话，他会认同他的做法。当然的话里边也提到了几点的话，有一点他对战争考虑了2个点的，这也是他第一次在公开场合讨论这个伊朗战争的部分。在伊朗战争的部分他这个提到他没有考虑到，他对他来说连他的专家都没有考虑到的话，居然伊朗会对沙地阿拉伯夸塔还有这个科威特这些这个可以说是回教穆斯林国家这个开战以后，所以这个部分的话他也是没有意识到的。他说伊朗对这个以色列 还击这个是可以预料的但是没有想到的预料的话是他居然向自己的这个穆斯林这个国家，并且沙特阿拉伯是往往在出售石油这方面跟伊朗是非常好的所以真的这部分他是没有意料到的。另外一个呢，没有让人意料到的话，就是这个NATO包括英国首相，然后川普说我们开战之前曾经的话，要不要你们英国一起派派军力来帮忙英国的首相他都是拖延时间，都不愿意。等我们摧毁了伊朗的所有的军事力量以后，他说我才出兵。所以川普的话他就嘲笑，他说英国的话我赢了以后你才来派兵，以后我需要你的时候你躲得远远一点。他也得了一个结论，他说 NATO 的话只有我们保护他们的份没有 NATO 的话在我们美国需要他的时候不要期待这个英国，不要期待 NATO 其他的合约国来帮我们美国，我们美国必须要强大自己的军事力量。当然的话，它里边再度提到伊朗战争已经打了那么长时间的时候，会不会影响经济？川普说这个经济的部分我完全考虑到，但是如果我们现在不采取行动，那我们很有可能这个再过1个多月他们等了伊朗有了这个核弹能力之后，我们美国的安全它肯定会受到威胁，因为伊朗政府会毫不犹豫来使用核弹来攻击伊朗，攻击美军的基地。所以针对这个部分他不得不要采取行动，对股票会受影响，以后石油价格会上涨，但是对整个美国国家安全的话，他完全是觉得这个牺牲是这个代价是值得的。当然的话在里边提到的话，国内的部分也提到这个 Safe American Act 这个部分他说早上的时候已经跟Senator John Thune 谈过以后希望尽力的这个推出，以后让美国这个参议院来通过拯救美国法案，并且的话他一再强调的话民主党他们是不希望川普的胜利，但是的话他们其实根本不爱国这个他们的政策糟透了，所以的话这个要赢这个选举的话，这个拯救美国法案这非常重要，所以他也会呼吁所有的共和党议员要团结起来推动这个拯救美国法案的通过另外一方面的话，他在针对加州的州长 Newsom 他里边的话也讲了一个 political incorrect 政治不准确的，我相信左媒也一定会炒作的，就是他指责他说我们这个 Newsom 州长里边的话他本身就有学识障碍，以后的话我们不希望的话他说他明知道说这个嘲笑别人这个批评别人的话有学习障碍的话，这部分的话是不对的。但是川普也是讲明白，他说可能不正确，但是的话我们需要一个是最聪明智商最高的人士，你要相信我们要知道我们美国的对手他们智商非常高，我们不需要的话一个学习障碍有问题的人来做总统。所以这部分他说他明知道以后这样子会被别人批评，但是川普说我们我不管，我直接说了当然的话也提到的话中国问题，当然今天的话已经说因为美国要求这个中国说服伊朗政府以后这个保证经过Hamas 的海峡的这个船的话，中国政府应该跟说服伊朗政府以后保证这个航运的恢复正常。这部分的话这个因为这个原因川普这个推延这个1个月去访问中国。但是川普今天呢官方的在记者会里边谈到，他说 现在战争正在进行之中，我不需要坐镇白宫指挥这个战争。如果我到中国去以后战争还在进行，这个是这个非常不适当的。所以他以这个理由的话，他说我们现在正在想办法，这个等了战争结束以后的意思就是才会到中国去访问所以这部分可以看得出他就是访问中国的话，这个部分延后了。当然他最后还是批评民主党现在的话这个拖延时间，不给 DHS 还有这个机场安检人员的这个发薪水，他这个指责了。你可以看得出，以前的话民主党不给联邦政府经费，以后以这个理由，最后的话拖了43天关门。现在的话已经有这个2个 paycheck， 2次这些联邦这个安检人员拿不到支票。真的这个部分的话，他说这些民主党根本是不会在乎这个民众的这个痛苦他再度呼吁的话，大家要团结起来，以后这个来想办法能够这个挽救美国、拯救美国，通过选举法案保证中期选举这个共和党能够这个保住这个参众两院的优势。好的，谢谢大家谢谢 Kevin 的问候。还有的话，这个我们这个另外一个的 Oka Hard Work 里边，他说80多岁了体力精力还是那么好，这个超过40岁的这个的人，当然了，川普你可以看得出今天的话行程他的精神状态是非常非常好的。好的，谢谢大家收看今天的邓鸿说法节目，我们下期再会。